A soldier in the United States Army is going to have a lot of firsts. Their first duty station, that first MRE, that first promotion, and all sorts of other examples. But in today's video, I want to talk about some of my firsts. And that video starts right now. Everybody always remembers their first love, their first car, their first whatever type of thing. And when you're in the Army, you're probably going to remember a lot of your first things, that happened to you, that you do in the Army and whatnot. And I got 10 that I kind of wanted to highlight in this video so I can tell you all about my firsts. This isn't a thing I always do on the channel. Sometimes I'm teaching you about the Army, sometimes I'm sharing some Army news, sometimes I'm sharing some stories from my time in the Army. And if that's the kind of thing you're interested in, make sure you're subscribed to this channel, make sure you're liking this video, and making sure you're commenting. So let's get into my first in this video of firsts. That is my first duty station. My first duty station was Fort Riley, Kansas. I did not pick that. You do a little dream sheet at the very beginning, when you're first coming into the Army, you usually do like an AIT or something and say what places you're trying to get stationed at or where you want to get stationed at. Fort Riley was not on there. Nonetheless, that's what I got. I didn't particularly love Fort Riley, mainly just because it didn't really have a whole lot of things that I'm into. Mainly Fort Riley feels like it's a really great location if you're into like hunting and fishing. Outside of that, kind of hit or miss. I'm not at all a hunter or a fisher, so I wasn't into those kinds of things. So I was pretty bored in Fort Riley and wasn't really super excited about being there, and I was pretty happy to get the hell out of there. So at my first duty station was also my first unit, which was 113 Armor. 113 Armor was a armor unit. Obviously they had, Abrams tanks, a lot of tankers and everything, and then support elements to kind of support those tanker operations and gunnery and everything else that they were kind of doing. But that unit isn't even an armor unit anymore. It's now, I believe, 113 Cav, and I think they're now like mostly scouts and Bradleys or strikers or something, and they're not even at Fort Riley anymore. I believe they're now at Fort Bliss. But when they're at Fort Riley and they were 113 Armor, that was my first unit. At that first unit is where I had my very first squad leader, and he was a new NCO. His name was Sergeant Darcy. Sergeant Darcy had only been an E5 as sergeant for probably, I think, a couple of months or something like that, I believe, when I showed up to the unit, because I remember like a lot of the other soldiers telling me about how, oh yeah, he just recently got promoted. Oh, I remember when he was Specialist Darcy and blah, 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 and all this kind of stuff. He wasn't a bad squad leader. He was good. He was a cool guy. I ended up becoming friends with the guy, and we're probably not supposed to do that kind of a thing. You're not supposed to be an NCO hanging out with privates, but he did, and I hung out with him, and he hung out with me, and we'd go over to his house. We'd go to sometimes strip clubs and bars and all sorts of stuff that you're probably not supposed to do because that's fraternizing, but nonetheless, he was a cool squad leader, so I liked my first squad leader. Sergeant Darcy was pretty cool. Also at that first duty station, at my first unit, was my first time living in the barracks, and I had my very first roommate, or roommates in this case. It's not like it is nowadays where you have, a nice little common area that maybe has like a kitchen and a bathroom and then you have two separate rooms. No, the barracks back then were awful. And I'm sure there's some even older school veterans that have more awful stories about how the barracks were even worse back in their day, but we won't get into that. I mean, my barracks room was just a big room, bathrooms down the hall, no bathroom in the room. And you're sharing that with 1, 2, sometimes 3 people in that room, and the only privacy you have is between the wall lockers. But my first roommates were actually 2 mortarmen. I was brand new. I didn't really have crap figured out very well in those barracks. So they really just kind of stuffing new soldiers where they had room. They usually try to keep platoon integrity, so that way you are with someone who is, within your platoon. At this time, they really didn't have, I don't think, availability to put somebody in a room with, a specific person, or that was from that platoon. So I just kind of got stuck being with the mortarmen. So these just 2 mortar guys, they drank all the time. I mean, there's soldiers that drink sometimes, but these guys drank like every single day, and they were super into Tony Hawk Pro Skater. So every day I remember these guys would get off work and they'd be playing on the PlayStation, playing Tony Hawk Pro Skater and drinking beers. I wouldn't say they were great roommates. They kind of shafted me on space because they enjoyed, just being the 2 of them in that barracks room. And then this outsider comes in, this young soldier and everything, this brand new private. And so they gave me this small little section in the middle of the room while, one guy had the front of the room, another guy had the back of the room by the window. I had this small little section sandwiched in the middle between their wall lockers and my wall lockers. It was only enough room for the bed to fit there and a walk space for me to get to that bed. That lasted for a good several months of me having those roommates being in that room before eventually they had some space for one of the rooms, and then they joined me up with another soldier who's actually in my platoon. I don't remember the guys' names. I don't remember. But yeah, they were kind of crappy roommates, but I probably wasn't a great roommate either. I probably was messy. I don't know. You know, it was probably mutual, but those guys, not somebody I stayed in contact with, of course. So I wasn't friends with those guys, but my very first friend obviously came in basic training. My first Army friend, the first individual I would call my friend that I made friends with, was in basic training. The guy's name was Yazi. I can't remember where Yazi was from. He was from the United States, but he has like an family heritage and origin. I believe he was born in California because we're both from California, I'm pretty sure, and so we kind of connected there. But Yazi was a cool dude. We made kind of connection. We were buddies, and I have no idea what happened to Yazi because I think about halfway through basic or something like that, he was having a hard time adjusting to being in basic training, and he got chaptered out. At least that's all I know. I mean, he might have gotten recycled and then eventually adapted, but I know that the last communication I had with Yazi, he was telling me that he was having a hard time, and the drill sergeants were starting the paperwork to get him out of the Army and stuff, and so they moved him somewhere else away from everybody who was training and stuff like that, and never saw the guy again. Back in those days, you didn't have Facebook, you didn't even have MySpace yet. I think he gave me his email address, and I don't think we really stayed in contact though. So I have no idea what happened to Yazi, where he's at nowadays or whatever. If you're watching this, Yazi, and you remember me, hit me up, man. Now before I get into the next 5, you may or may not have noticed, but that's a badass new watch I got rocking right here. This is from Carbonox, and this is called the X Ranger. This is a smartwatch. It can do a lot of your normal smartwatch stuff. I can check text messages, I can check my heart rate, I can answer and even make phone calls from the watch, but there's a couple of things that is not normal to normal smartwatches. Most smartwatches, they can only last maybe a day on a full charge. Now this guy can probably go a week, maybe 15 days. It's been about a week or so since I have charged this watch, and I'm still doing pretty darn good. Great for if you're in the military, you're gonna be out in the field for a week or something like that. You got, busy life going on in the Army, in the military, whatever. You don't have to worry about having to charge this watch every single day. Another thing that's not common to normal smartwatches is this thing can take quite a beating. I know soldiers are often, worried about, am I gonna, get a watch and then just get it ruined in the field, banging up against a vehicle, doing some low crawls or whatever, and jack this watch up. You don't have to worry about it with this watch. It's not indestructible, but it can handle quite the beating. If you want to see what it can exactly handle, I got a video down in the description box down below where I do a deep dive into this watch on my Chaos Unboxing channel, where I unbox it, put it through a little bit of a ringer, show you what it can do. So check out that link. Also check out the link down below for the link to Carbonox to check out their other watches that they have. Check them out. Another first is my first field problem, and my first field problem was actually the National Training Center. Most people may just do a normal like sticks lanes or gunnery or something like that. I had to do NTC. It's kind of just diving right into it, right? Because NTC is a little bit bigger of a field problem, but my first field problem was the National Training Center in Fort Irwin, California. It was like as soon as I showed up to my unit, like I was in the receptions, like you have a reception still when you show up to your first duty station to kind of get you in process at that duty station. So while I was in reception and they know what unit you're going to, they're like, oh, these guys are getting ready to go to NTC pretty soon. I didn't know what that meant, but I was prepared to get ready to go to the field, because I think it was maybe I had only been in that unit for maybe like a month, and we were off to NTC. And there we go, my first experience of being in the field, heading off to the National Training Center to go do an NTC rotation for a month. So you know what? If you're gonna make it a first, might as well make it a good one. My first field problem was NTC. First of many, because I think I went on to do like probably a good 5, 8, something. I don't know, I did a lot of NTC rotations. A big one that a lot of people are gonna remember is their first MRE. My first MRE, of course, was in basic training, and it was the spaghetti MRE. The spaghetti one isn't the same contents as like the current day spaghetti one. They a lot of times change up those menus a little bit to where, the main dish may be the same, they keep a lot of those same ones, but the contents that come with it is different. I specifically remember what that one had. That one had a pretty good kind of content menu to it. You had the main dish, the spaghetti. I remember there was those Peanut butter crackers were in there. Not the ones you have to make yourself in, with the MREs, but the actual good ones like you can buy in the store, where it's, actual crackers with peanut butter in between, little sandwiches. I also remember that one had Skittles. I was like, sweet, Skittles. I hadn't had really any candy at that point, because I think by the time we got to our first MRE, we were doing our little sticks lane in basic training, I think it was. So, you didn't get to have candy in the chow hall or anything else like that, and so it was kind of cool to have candy in there. I know I've heard from some people that, the drill sergeants would take the candy out of their MREs and kind of strip the MREs. Our drill sergeants didn't do that, so I had some Skittles. It was cool.
There's free Skittles!
Another first is my first promotion, and I came into the Army as an E1. I didn't get to come in the Army as any higher rank or anything. I didn't do JROTC. They didn't have it in high school. I didn't have any college yet. I was fresh out of high school. So I came in as an E1, so my first promotion obviously was to E2. That happened at NTC because, as I talked about earlier, we went off to NTC, and that was still pretty early in my Army career, and I qualified for promotion, and there was a few others that were also brand new soldiers and stuff like that. And I remember, I think it was towards the end of NTC, that rotation, they got a bunch of us together and we all got promoted from E1 to E2, and I was like, cool, finally got some rank. And at that time we were in BDUs, so you had the rank on your collars, so finally had something to wear on the collars because they were blank for quite a while. My first deployment was a combat deployment. You probably heard the stories before, but of course it was to Iraq. I only did 2 deployments, and both of them were to Iraq, but my first deployment was to Iraq, specifically northern part of Iraq, in an area called Tal Afar. That was with the 3rd ACR, so that was my first deployment of only 2 though. I did 2, but I didn't do any training deployments ever. I only did combat deployments, and my first one, of course, was to Iraq. Now, one last one, my first re-enlistment, because I stayed in the Army for almost 11 years, so I had to re-enlist several times to stay in for that long, and I didn't even want to stay in for that long. Maybe got a card that pops up that talks about that video, but I ended up re-enlisting for my first time while I was in Korea, because I didn't want to try to ETS from Korea, and I didn't have enough time left for them to send me back to the States, so I re-enlisted while in Korea. That re-enlistment was a short one. I think all my re-enlistments were short ones. They were always just 2-year re-enlistments. I re-enlisted for 2 years, maybe got a small bonus. In this case, this first one, I re-enlisted for 2 years. I think I got like a little $2,000 bonus. I got choice of duty station type of thing. And then of course, one of the cool things that usually a lot of people do when they re-enlist is they usually want to re-enlist somewhere cool. Mine was pretty cool. This is actually the only time I chose a cool re-enlistment place. All the other times I re-enlisted, I just wanted to knock it out and get it over with, because I really didn't want to re-enlist in the first place. But nonetheless, my first one was at what is called the Bridge of No Return. When I was stationed in Korea, I was stationed at the Joint Security Area. That's the JSA. That's at Camp Boniface, and it's right there on the border. We were the individuals. They were right there at the border of North and South Korea. One of the things you have inside the DMZ, inside the demilitarized zone of that area, is you have a lot of like buildings for them to do conferences. They have like a little town called Panmunjom, and then you also had this bridge, and the bridge was called the Bridge of No Return. The reason why it's called the Bridge of No Return is after the Korean War had kind of come to a ceasefire, the armistice and everything, you had some families that were separated on north side of Korea and the south side of Korea, and they gave individuals the option like, hey, here's a bridge. If you would like to go join your family on the north side, or if you'd like to join your family on the south side, you can cross this bridge over into whichever side you would like, but you cannot return. So it was called the Bridge of No Return. I had a photo of that. I have no idea what happened to that photo. I wish I could find that photo of me standing on that bridge. It's not like a thing, where there's like a lot of people around. It's because, it's very restricted kind of a thing. And so it's just me, I think the lieutenant that was doing the re-enlistment ceremony, somebody holding the flag, and me raising my right hand, while in the background there's a guard tower with a North Korean watching us as I'm re-enlisting. I really hope that maybe someday I can find that damn picture. I've looked for it so many times. I have not had any luck trying to find out where that picture's at, but that was my first re-enlistment. It was on the Bridge of No Return in Korea. There might be other firsts that I probably had, and maybe if you can think of something that you want to know about, well, drop a comment down in the comment section down below. Ask me the question, what was your first this? What were your first that? If you can think of something that you're curious about, what was my first this or that, then I'll try to answer it if I can, just let me know. And I'm sure there's probably some veterans out there, maybe some people who are currently serving in the Army, maybe in the military, they can think of their first duty station, their first MRE and all that kind of fun stuff. And if you would like to share some of that stuff, I would love to hear about it down in the comment section down below. So drop your comments. I want to read them. By the way, I do read them, and if it's something cool, I'll give you a heart and comment back or something cool. So please don't think that I don't read the comments. I do. I may not always reply back. I may not always give it a heart, but I read your guys' comments. So if you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that thumbs up. Make sure you're subscribed to this channel. Check out my links down in the description box down below for Carbonox, my unboxing video at the Chaos Unboxing channel. If you want to continue reviewing Experience here though, I got some videos right here that I highly recommend. I put a lot of hard work and effort into them. Might as well check them out while you're here. You got nothing better to do, right? Check them out. Thanks for watching. I'm Christopher Chaos. I'll see you next time. See ya.